fascinating stories and learn weird and wonderful things about the world at the same time as improving your English. I'm Alistair Budge, and today we are going to be talking about a lady called Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, a lady you probably know by the name Queen Elizabeth II. We'll talk about the life of Queen Elizabeth, how she was never meant to be queen in the first place, how she and the country developed over the years. We'll talk about some of the controversies she has survived, how she changed the monarchy, and we'll also have time to hear about some unusual experiences she has had. And, of course, we will also talk about the particular type of English that she uses, a type of English so famous that it has its own name, the Queen's English. Okay then, let's get started. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was never meant to be queen. And in more ways than one, her almost 70 years on the throne have been unlikely. For starters, until 2013, when the law was changed, a son came above a daughter in the line of succession. That is, no matter how many daughters a king or queen had and how old they were, if a son was born, he would automatically go to the front of the line when the king or queen died. So, as a woman, the odds were already against the young Elizabeth. She had a younger sister, Margaret, who was no competition. But if her parents had another child who was male, a son, he would leapfrog both of them in the line of succession. What's more, neither Elizabeth's father nor mother were on the throne when she was born, nor were they directly in line to the throne. When she was born in 1926, her grandfather, King George V, was King of England. He had 5 sons and 2 daughters. His second son, George, was Elizabeth's father. Next in line to the throne, in the event of King George V's death, would be his first son, Edward. And so it was when George V died in 1936, when Elizabeth was 10 years old. The throne passed to her uncle, who became Edward VIII. He wasn't to last for long, though. He was in love with an American lady called Wallis Simpson, who had already divorced one man and was in the process of divorcing another. Long story short, there was strong opposition to the new king's relationship with this American divorcee. And instead of leaving her, he left the monarchy, abdicating his position as king and passing the throne to his brother, Elizabeth's father. To state the obvious, this was unexpected. It had never happened before. No British monarch had ever voluntarily given up the throne before, especially for something as trivial as love. Elizabeth's father became king, much to his surprise as well. And in an instant, or at least in under a year, Elizabeth went from being a relatively minor young royal to being next in line to the throne, aged only 10 years old. Even though her father was now king, he was only 40 years old. Young, comparatively speaking, and Elizabeth no doubt thought that she would be able to live out her childhood in relative obscurity as a semi-normal person before having to take on the duties of queen herself, if that was what was required. It wasn't to be. In 1952, after 15 years on the throne, her father died of a blood clot when Elizabeth was only a couple of months away from her 26th birthday. Like many men at the time, he had been a heavy smoker and died shortly after his 56th birthday. Elizabeth was in Kenya at the time, on a tour with her new husband, Philip. She learned of her father's death from the local news. In an instant, all eyes were on her, on this 25-year-old girl. Up until then, she had lived a relatively secluded life. She hadn't gone to school. and instead had been taught by private tutors at her family home. As a young woman, Elizabeth had got married. She had enjoyed time living in Malta with her new husband, Prince Philip, and she had been enjoying life out of the spotlight. Her father had been unwell for several years and had actually had his left lung removed. So, Elizabeth, in preparation for the day she would become queen, reportedly brought black clothes with her wherever she went, just in case she received the news and had to change into mourning clothes. So, she was prepared from a practical view at least. But no doubt there is not much that can really prepare you for life as queen. At her coronation in 1953, she became the most famous woman in the country and one of the most famous women in the entire world. Her face was on the money, not only in the UK, but in Canada, Australia, and all over British colonies in Africa and the Caribbean. She was on postage stamps, she was all over the newspapers. You could take a picture of the Queen to almost any town or village in the world, and people would know who she was. To state the obvious, it must have been an incredible amount of pressure for anyone, but especially for someone who had grown up in a tiny bubble. Now, let's quickly reflect on the world and the country that Elizabeth found when she became queen in 1952. The Second World War had finished only 7 years before. There was still rationing in Britain, meaning that there were still limits on food and certain goods. And indeed, the Queen used her ration coupons to buy her wedding dress. Britain still had colonies all over the world. Europe was rebounding. The United States had been fighting in Korea. The Cold War was just getting started. By 1952, the process initiated by the first majority Labour government in Britain of getting rid of the colonies and starting the Commonwealth was well underway, and Britain's empire was firmly on the decline. And talking specifically about the British monarchy, the public hated the Queen's uncle, Edward VIII, for abdicating, and his brother, King George VI, had a tough job at trying to win back public support and trust in the British monarchy. The post war period was a period of change in the UK. People questioned the status quo. The Labour government introduced heavy taxes on wealth. And there were real question marks over whether the UK should have a monarch as its head of state. Looking across the channel, France seemed to be doing okay without a monarch. Italy had got rid of its monarch. And let's not forget that the British people had revolted against their monarch before and executed the king and abolished the monarchy in 1649. So it wasn't a complete impossibility that it could happen again. So, when Elizabeth was crowned queen, the UK, its monarchy, and the wider world was in a slightly precarious, a difficult situation. If she makes it to February the 6th of 2022, when she will only be a couple of months away from her 96th birthday, she will become the first